I know you started your acting career at a very early age. Could you tell us how you got into acting? And was there anything against you from your parents for that choice of career?
Well, I started acting age 4, really, doing Little Miss Muffet at school. And I did it so realistically that when I ran away out of the classroom, I dropped the curds of whey off my lap and it smashed on the floor and there was glass everywhere, and I literally stopped the show because all these little children were running around without anything on their feet. And I did this wonderful scream. Judith Black was the spider. I screamed at her and ran off. And I got such a huge round of applause from the parents. I thought, yeah, I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing this. I love it. So from aged 4, I was hooked, really, on that audience reaction. And I did get a lot of support, especially from my mother. I think she was probably the strongest influence on my career. But they didn't really want me to act. They wanted me to do speech therapy or teach or something other than that, because it's so precarious, such a precarious profession. But anyway, I'm an Aries, so there was no stopping me really.
Did you have any goals? Did you see a career in films or theatre or even on TV?
Well, Royal Shakespeare Company was my love. Classical theatre is what I'm most interested in. And I also like small theatres very much, so that's always been a goal of mine. I would still love to do a major film role. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But really, theatre was my one main ambition, and I achieved it quite early on. I actually did 2 years with the Royal Shakespeare Company before I even did Doctor Who, and I left the company last Thursday. So I've been backwards and forwards with them 4 or 5 times over the years.
So did you find it easy to get work when you left RADA?
Do you know, the profession's always been really kind to me. Really kind. I've had very few periods out of work, so I don't like to say it too loudly in case I tempt the fate. But it's, I think if you're dedicated enough and you're prepared to do the work that doesn't pay terribly well, but is very rewarding artistically, then somehow or other the finances take care of themselves. You do manage to get a job that maybe you don't enjoy doing quite so much, but that will pay a bit more and will therefore finance the work that you're very interested in.
Now you started in Doctor Who, of course, in The Face of Evil. Do you have any memories of that story in particular?
Of The Face of Evil? I did the first day's filming, we'd had no rehearsal at all, and I'd met Tom very briefly. I'd shaken hands over a lunch table with him, and then he'd shot off to do another episode. So it was my first meeting of everybody, and I was rather shy in my costume, a bit embarrassed and inhibited by it. I kept on this pink, full-length, quilted dressing gown as long as I could. And then Pennant said, come on, the evil moment has come. You must take off that dressing gown, and we've got to get down with, filming and everything. And I took the dressing gown off, and the reaction from the crew was so complimentary. But all inhibitions left, and I can't remember who the lighting man was on that. But I do remember him saying, oh, I'm really going to enjoy lighting you.
The robots in the next story. Did the character begin to develop the way you wanted it to, or was there a lot of input from the director and the producer as to the way they wanted the character to go?
At the beginning, I had a lot of input, and people were writing with Leela's character in mind. A little later on, it was rather difficult to hold on to the very positive aspects of Leela. I mean, I was forever getting scripts that says Leela screams. Well, she doesn't. I really want to hold on to what I've got here and not become a weedy companion in any way. And I think Liz Sladen had done such a good job with her character, and she'd coped so well with all that ankle twisting, screaming and everything that went on. It would be stupid to try and recreate that, so I tried very hard to go on to something different. I did nearly kill a cameraman on that script. Do you know that story? The knife I had for the first story was a genuine knife, and indeed for half the second story it was a genuine knife. And I had to throw the knife like this into the back of a robot's neck. And the cameraman, I don't know, the cameraman was there and the robot was there. I don't know how. But as I threw it, it came out too early and went like this across the cameraman, and they said, I think we better go for that again. And everybody left the studio except for one quaking cameraman and a poor robot. And after that they took my knife away and gave me a blunt one. I mean, obviously when it had to stick in something, then I was allowed a proper knife, but apart from that, I just had this. I've still got it actually. I was going to auction it, but my son said, you can't let that out the house. So when he loses interest in it, I'll maybe auction it now.
I found it was a good story for Leela.
Really good. Yeah.
What was it like to be attacked by that giant rat?
Well, that was the only scream, really. That's the only scream I allowed Leela. I defy anybody not to scream if they're being eaten by a giant rat. It was actually very difficult to do because I had glandular fever when we recorded that actual scene. I had a temperature of 102 and I was just feeling ghastly. And the sewers that we were crawling around in had only been painted that morning, so they could only put cold water in. I'm not quite sure why, but the mixture of hot water and the paint, they were a bit worried it was going to run or something, I don't know. So the mixture of cold water, glandular fever, and some real rats running around amongst the fake ones. It wasn't really very pleasant. But, you know, theatrically it was one of the most, I mean, there's a photograph from it there, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
It was one of the most dramatic sequences I had to do. So.
A chance to dress up as well.
Yeah, or dress down. Victorian underwear.
Next came Fang Rock, and we saw a change of producer.
Yes.
Graham Williams takes over from Philip Hinchcliffe. Did you find changing styles again?
I found Fang Rock the most difficult story to do. It was originally written for Liz. It was originally written for Sarah Jane. So we were going to do a story about vampires, but we couldn't because BBC were also doing a documentary about vampires, and they were a bit worried that the whole thing would come, which I think is madness, because I think they would actually feed off each other. They could publicised for each other. Anyway, we ended up dusting this one, which had been a reject, dusting it down and crossing out Sarah Jane and writing Leela. So it was quite a difficult one for me to knit together. And we also shot it in Birmingham for reasons I didn't understand at the time, lack of studio space. So I had to commute that one. And the change of producer, indeed. And a female director, the first female director ever, I think, Paddy, who Tom insisted on calling Sir for the whole shoot. Anyway, I found that story very difficult, but there was a change in atmosphere, certainly, between the two producers. Philip is very cool. He's the kind of man, I just want to say in case I'm insulting anybody, he's the kind of man who wears his jacket, he doesn't put his arms through the sleeves. Do you know what I mean? You know that? And he's always kind of there in the corner. But never really contacting you, you know. But a very good producer, very, very good, the eye on everything. Whereas Graham worked much more from the floor and was much, rest his soul, much cuddlier and kinder and probably less networking, and therefore maybe not as good a producer. I don't know. I didn't know enough about the business then to be able to say who was the best, really. But I certainly felt more contacted by Graham, but in a way I felt safer with Philip. You know, the interests of the programme were somehow safer.
Did you feel personally that you weren't the new girl anymore, and that the new producer coming in didn't know quite as much about it as you did?
In a way, but you often feel that even when you're new, that you know what there's a moment when you claim the character. But I always think it's in rehearsal when people stop calling you Louise or Lou and start calling you by the character that you're playing. You've won. She's yours. She's you. You know. claim that. But I did like going back to blue eyes, I must say. That was because working to make my eyes brown, I have to wear red contact lenses. And it's not a colour that the brain adjusts to. It's no accident that all pubs are red, because it makes you feel agitated, so you're constantly getting up to buy another drink. Yeah, it's good. It's really deliberate. So to look through red all the time, I actually found after about 4 hours I would get quite breathless and need to take them out just for 10-15 minutes. So I was quite glad to get back to my own lenses, which at that point they're not now, but they were tinted blue, but the brain adjusts to blue, so it's not a problem.
Next we go on to the Invisible Enemy. Introduction of K9.
Oh, Kane, I love John Leeson. I'm just in love with John Leeson. Have you met him? Has anyone here met him? Yeah, do you know his story about the K9 sound-alike competition? In America, when we went to a convention, they had a K9 sound-alike competition, and nobody knew he was there. And he got done up like an American fan, with a baseball cap and 2 cameras and badges and Star Trek things under his arm, and he came along and he entered the competition for the K9, and do you know, he laughed. He came second. But you can imagine, I mean, it was a huge convention, and when they said, well, the real K9, please present themselves, and he ran up through, I mean, he'd been mingling with the fans all day, and he ran up through the aisle down the, they just went berserk and loved it. He said it's the only voiceover he's done where he's had to put in for a dry cleaning bill afterwards, because the BBC have this bizarre system whereby, I don't know if they still do it, but whereby they hire their own props off themselves. They say it's an American system, which meant we couldn't afford to have K9 in the rehearsal room. So what we had was John Leeson running around on all fours. But I think theatrically that worked quite well, because what it meant was that we actually built up a relationship with something that was very real instead of a tin object. And that transferred itself to the studio. I think it worked very nicely. And, you know, as a good, if I was director, I think it's something I might have suggested anyway. The K9 Mark 1 was rather difficult to work with. You know, quick doctor, we must get out of here, we're in terrible danger, and then we have to stand around while K9 does a 15-point turn. Because he can't just do a Yui, you know, or 2 heavies come in off camera and hoist him round, because they just cut to us while we pretend that we're watching him moving. So that was, technically, it's quite difficult.
Next we saw Image of the Fendal, with a change of costume. Did you have any say in
oh yeah, the
costume?
producers weren't very happy about that. They wanted me back in my original leathers. Yeah, that was, I don't know whose, I think that was the designer's idea that I should move into the tennis dress. It was a bit like anyone for tennis, wasn't it?
That's right, and you did the different hairstyle as well.
Yeah, well the hair went up because I said, could you just take that much off my hair, to one of the BBC makeup ladies, and that much came off. So anyway, we put it up for a while, but they weren't very happy about that either. I was only allowed to get away with it for that one episode.
So, change back.
Yeah.
Did you prefer that costume?
It was certainly more comfortable, but I actually think looks-wise the first one was better. But I don't know, what do you think? I don't know. Like the first one, but yeah. We have a vote here for the first one.
Now, The Sunmaker's very clever script.
It's my favourite.
Favourite story?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was Bob, wasn't it? Bob Holmstone.
Right.
Yeah. I think he was the best writer for me. And he was a smashing bloke too, really nice bloke. And it was very PC, very politically correct, I think, that story. Quite naive, you know, the freeing of oppressed workers. It was what we were out to do, but it was actually pure Marxism. If you dissect it and look at the script, you're looking at very, very left-wing politics there, and the essence of the politics, not the politics that are laid onto the politics, but the true heart of equality and non-exploitation.
That was a very good part for Leela.
Yeah.
Do you think certain writers wrote better for the character?
I think Robert and Chris Boucher. I never know how to say his name. Boucher. I think those two wrote very well for Leela, but I think the other writers, I mean, there may be an exception. Maybe my memory isn't as clear as it should be, but I did feel a lot of the time I was having to fit Leela into the story rather than the story was being fitted around the Doctor and I think under any circumstances, even bedroom farce, if you're looking at the relationships between people and the humour comes out of that circumstance, then it works much better than if you suddenly think, oh, this situation will be good, let's fit everybody into it. It's a subtle difference, but you can really tell the writers who have got to know their characters before they fit them into the situation, and those that have thought of the adventure first.
Underworld, following story, relied heavily on CSO. Was that difficult to work around?
It's really boring. We work constantly on it. Does anybody not know what CSO is? That's right. Everybody knows. Right, so we just spent the entire time walking around in a... Someone there doesn't know. What they do is they put the monster onto one screen and they put us in a set and then they blend the two. I mean, that's, in layman's terms, that's what happens. But our set has to be blue and we can't wear anything blue, so it means the monster appears wherever anything blue is. They had to do a special little test on me because my eyes are very blue to make sure that my eyes would come through as my eyes and not show whatever they were trying to overlay on. Anyway, we spent the whole time, you know, creeping around in a bit of blue cloth. And then occasionally someone would show me a monitor and say, this is what you're reacting to. And you go, all right, thanks. I didn't like doing that one.
Have you seen any of them since, and do you think, oh, you know, what do we do there?
What, any of the stories?
Yeah, the stories.
Well, yeah, I saw a bit of Underworld actually quite recently, just a clip, and I just thought it was so obvious that it was some kind of special effect. And what else did I see? I saw a bit of Sunmakers as well. I thought, oh yeah, it was quite good. Yeah, my memory was true then.
What about the invasion of time, the final story for your character?
How would you write Leela out of the thing? I mean, she could have died saving the Doctor's life, or I don't know, something heroic, but to fall in love with someone I'd held hands with 3 episodes and I only held hands with him because I thought, oh, I've got to be married to him by episode 6, so I better put in a bit of love interest here. It wasn't in... I think what happened was that they very flatteringly wanted me to stay, and they wrote something that could be changed at the last minute, and they tried very hard to woo me back, even up to the night before we recorded the last scene.
What would have happened if the Time Lord had changed? Would you still like it?
If the Time Lord had changed, well, I don't know. But I had been offered Portia at the Bristol Old Vic, and I was itching to get back to some classical theatre, so anyway, I took the decision to go.
Is it true that you were asked to return when Tom left and Louise Jameson took over?
They said, would I, John Nathan Turner, have you met John? Yeah? Outrageous character. I was doing a play at Derby, all my sons up at Derby, and he rang and said, I want to talk to you and it's top secret, and please will you come down and have lunch with me. And I knew he was a producer, but I didn't know he was a producer doctor, and I thought, oh, my own series, I'm going to fancy my own. So I went down and had lunch, and he asked, would I come back and be Leela? And I said I would for 2 stories. I would do the last one of Tom's and the first one of the new Doctor, who was then not cast. And he said, no, that wasn't good enough. He wanted me to do the whole, at least 1 season. And so in the end I said, no, I wouldn't do that. There were other things happening for me. And there's only so many ways you can say, what is it, Doctor? What is it? Doctor, what is it? What is it, Doctor? You run out of inspiration after a while. So I didn't go back. That was one of the most embarrassing lunches of my, I'm sure some of you know this story. I swanned round the BBC for about an hour and a half, round the bar. And calling everyone darling, because I can never remember anyone's name. And I think that's why actors do like lovey darling acting, because you meet so many people and we're fond of them, and it just seems so rude not to remember someone's name, so you end up going darling. Anyway, I've done all that lovey acting, and suddenly there was a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and this very kind cameraman said, "You do know your dress is tucked in your knickers, don't you?" And I spent the whole of the lunch hour. Anyway, John only bought me a packet of peanuts. Not whining and dining. Come down and have lunch. Diet Coke and a packet of peanuts. Spares no expense.
Were you asked to come back in the Five Doctors?
No.
Or do you think turning that down had something to do with it?
Well, I wondered if he bore a grudge, but he's never admitted to such, and we've had quite a lot of fun at conventions, so I don't think so. I think the problem there was Tom didn't want to do the Five Doctors, so the only bits they had available was when Lala was his assistant, so I think that's what happened. Who knows?
Did you find work easily after Doctor Who?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not television work, but I found theatre work very easy. Television work took a couple of years before but it's the same whenever you do a series, you can kind of usually kiss goodbye to 24 months on the box, and then they'll bring you back.
Was your next TV role in the
Omega Factor?
Yeah. That never came back, the second series.
It was a great idea, I think, the Omega Factor, but I think the problem was that they got 6 different writers to write the first 6 episodes simultaneously, and the problem that I talked about earlier, it meant that we had 6 different quite good adventures, but with all different characters inside there, all different regulars, even though we were playing the same person. There was no kind of cohesive through line. As actors, we were left hauling our characters together. It didn't quite come off in the way that perhaps it could have done.
Did you go on from that to Tenko?
No, I can't remember, I did loads of theatre in the middle, but Tenko was my next series, yes, which was my favourite. I loved it.
It was a very demanding role, and how do you research the part of a prisoner of war?
The woman who devised it, did any of you watch the new comedy last night? Two women in one place. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, the woman that produced that was the woman that devised Tenko, Lavinia Warner. She now runs a company called Warner Sisters. You could try it on Warner Sisters. And she had worked on This Is Your Life. She was a researcher on This Is Your Life. And she'd had to do research on a woman who had been in a prisoner of war camp in Japan. And she got so interested in the subject, she gave up her job and she wrote a book called Beyond the Wire, which obviously I read for the research. And she devised Tenko. And that's how it started. And we had on Tenko, we had an advisor, a woman who was in her 40s, I think, and who had been 14 when she was let out of the camp. So you can imagine she'd had a pretty rough childhood. And she was very, very together. She always Molly. She always stood. She would never sit down. She always stood very straight. Always held on to her belongings, her handbag and stuff. Very correct. And one day we were in the studio, and a Japanese guard. They were so sweet. They were mostly French, our Japanese guards, and Japanese origin, obviously. But they were very gentle. It was very difficult to get them to be nasty to us. They found it very hard, acting-wise. I think the men felt quite threatened by 40-odd women as well. It's usually the other way around. So it was quite an unusual experience. Anyway, this actor guard walked past, and I was chatting to her here. And as he walked by, she went like that. And then she turned around to me and said, "I'm so sorry, I just threw all that." And it was the most, in a way, the most telling bit of research that I witnessed. That sheer terror that uniform produced in her. Even the knowledge that we were in a studio, that this person was now a friend of hers, but just that instinctive protection of herself. And it was a good, really good emotional thing to carry through the whole series, that at any point you could have a rifle butt in your stomach for absolutely no reason, or, you know, worse. To go into some of the research I did was quite grueling, and obviously there's no point in depicting any of that, but as long as you keep that threat going, theatrically it can work very well.
After the characters of Blanche and Leela, did you find that Susan Young in Bergerac was more like... Well, I was going to say more like Louise Jameson.
The thing is, I had two, more like me, no! The thing is, I had 2 children on my own by then, right? Single parent, and all the problems that had been having those children, and my mother dying, and it was a very difficult time for me personally, the early 80s, very difficult. And very wonderful too. I mean, my raison d'etre is now my children, so I'm deeply grateful for that time, but it wasn't easy. And the irony of the situation, what I'd have done without Bergerac, I don't know. I am just so glad to have had regular, good income and be able to remain high profile, and not to have to work too hard, because it wasn't really hard to work. I did maybe 2 or 3 days a fortnight. Occasionally I'd be working every day, they'd give me a full episode. But it was really quite easy, and John Nettles is an absolute dream to work with. He's a real sweetheart, so no problems there. But the irony was, there I am playing somebody who's constantly dolled up, who is very reliant on her man for her happiness, who was completely career-minded and didn't have children. In a way, Susan Young was the opposite to me, but I had to play her in order to maintain the lifestyle that enabled me not to have to wear makeup and look glamorous the entire time, not to have to be dependent on a man for my income, to be able to say, look, I'm sorry, this relationship isn't working, therefore my children and I are going to leave it. Yet I perpetrate the myth of a woman that is dependent on a man in order to be able to live as a woman who is not.
Did it at least get to be written out in a dramatic way?
It's very dramatic. I had actually left, and then they rang me up and said, do you mind if we kill you? But it did me a lot of good, that, because John and I were permanently splitting up and getting back together. I mean, how many times can a couple split up and get back together again? How many variations? Because people didn't really believe that I had left the series. So to actually have me ending up in a black plastic bag, well, actually my double, because there's no way they're going to get me into the sea at 5 o'clock in the morning. To have her end up in a black plastic bag, let not just, you know, the viewers know, but like the whole profession know that I was ready, willing and available for other work, basically.
You went to do Rides, which
Yes.
was very female dominated. Was that something that just came along, or is that the kind of role, did you look for?
It's another Lavinia Warner project. This is when she set up Warner Sisters. And I wanted to play the Irish character in that. I can't remember her name now. Anyway, I didn't get that, but Lavinia likes my work very much and wanted to use me, so we looked at 4 other parts and ended up with Janet, who in the second series did become a girl after my own heart. But in the first, I think in a way I was asked to play 2 different characters in the 2 different series. But that's okay, people change, it's alright.
You returned briefly to Dr. Who during for Dimensions of Time, for children in need.
Yes.
And of course you do a lot of work for charities.
Yeah.
How did you become involved in setting up Hope?
Hope happened. Hope is a bank account, really. It's a charitable organisation. I'm not a registered charity. It's a charitable organisation which feeds an orphanage in northern Romania. And like most of you, I was very moved by the pictures that were in the 1990s of Romanian orphans. And I was blessed with 4 weeks paid holiday, which very rarely happens in this profession. And I had just got married, so I was owed a honeymoon. I shook my husband awake in the middle of the night and said, can we go to Romania with a van load of aid? And he went, yeah. go for it, and then he said, you just have to promise that you're not going to bring a baby back with you. So I made that promise. It's a good job I did, because I think I'd have probably, you know, filled the van with babies, smuggled them up. Anyway, so we'd set about fundraising in a big way, and within 2 weeks had raised over £10,000. I was in a position of being able to get a lot of publicity at the time. And we took a van load of aid, and ever since then we've supported the orphanage with 1 or 2 trips a year over there. We've done things like set up a regular visiting homeopath, and the orphanage has doubled in size. She can now hold on to the children till they're 18, which is fantastic, because they were actually splitting them up aged 7, even twins. And the girls' orphanage was okay, but the boys' orphanage is pretty dire, the ones that don't. And put in washing machines and dryers, and you know, it's been a lot of hard graft, a lot of phone calls really. It's the technical bits that take the time. But anyway, that's what's happened, and that's what we do. I mean, the bank account's sitting with a couple of grand in it at the moment, and I'm going to try and get some vitamins and minerals out for this coming winter. I should do that within the next couple of weeks, really.
Because you've got a tape of children's stories,
yes,
which we've got today.
If anybody wants to buy, they're $4.99, 2 hours worth of children's stories. If you buy them for Christmas, anyone aged between 4 and 11, and there's other people you know on there are Peter Davison and Colin Baker, and Jan Chappell. Any of you know Jan Chappell from Blake 7? Yeah, she reads the story as well, along with people like Bob Peck and Steph Cole and Tess P. Jones and Ducky Hodge. So it's quite a good, impressive list of people. And the stories come from all over the world. Some are folk stories, some are classical. It's a real good mixture. And a friend of mine, Amanda Simons, who's got the most amazing voice, sings a sort of country and western song through the whole thing to link them all. So you want to keep your kids quiet in the car. It's a really good present. It's good stocking filler.
You've recently appeared in Bill Pike's videos.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in that? And does Doctor Who still follow you around in the profession? Do people associate Louise Jameson with the programme?
It's more with Bergerac, I would say, than Doctor Who. I think probably I'm more recognised for Bergerac, but maybe not. I would like to be more recognised for Tenko out of the 3, but anyway. Yes, Bill Baggs definitely used me because I had worked in science fiction, no question. Watch this space with Bill Baggs, because I think he's a real canny lad. I think he's going places, and I think he's very talented too. Talented and ambitious. He's very clever, the people he's used. Don't you think?
Yeah, he improves, I think.
Yes, each story. And he's also very interested in learning. I mean, he knows, of course he knows about directing a camera, but on my first one I did with him, he didn't know much about directing actors. And he really, really picked my brains on that. It's an area that I want to go into now, but probably more in theatre. About objectives and obstacles and breath control and Stanislavski and, you know, all the things that have gone into my training. He really wanted to know how to communicate to an actor, and because there is a sort of language that you can use with an actor that a lot of directors aren't taught anymore, and it means making shortcuts. It means you can just save time on the floor, and I think you can see that his direction really has improved over the episodes.
Are there any roles, I know we've mentioned movies, but are there any roles that you would like to attempt yourself, comedy?
I really want to play Cleopatra before it's too late, and it's just getting that way. I've got to get in there quick, and I really want to play Kate in the Shrew. So they're the 2 Shakespeare ones I'd like to go for. Comedy. I would love to do some comedy. I just got down to the last 5. I haven't got it. For a new Russ Abbott series that's being filmed in January. I think it's going to be called Married with Children, or Married for Life. I don't think they're sure yet. So, and they're good scripts. And I did think, yeah, this will be a good area to get into now. I mean, not just for me, but for my bank manager as well.
Right, I'd like to open it up. If anybody's got a question, if you'd like to raise your hand. Yes, sir.
Yes, Louise.
Yeah.
When you got the part of Leela, were you rather daunted at the prospect of succeeding someone like Nicholas Sladen, given the impact that she had on the fans of the programme?
No, I wasn't daunted. I mean, we call it naivety of youth, or I don't know. I've always kind of had the belief that I could do more or less anything. Arrogance. But it's, I did think she did very well, and I knew we weren't going to try and recreate that. So I didn't really feel like I was stepping into her shoes. I didn't realise quite how much the companions were lumped into a package deal when I took over in the show. So.
How did you feel about Tom Baker's dislike of Leela?
It was quite difficult to work with, because it overlapped into, I think, disliking me. And again, because I was so young, I didn't have the guts or the assertiveness to say, is there a problem here and can we sort it out? And it wasn't really until Horror of Fang Rock that I think Tom and I got our relationship sorted out, our working relationship sorted out properly. He's a very volatile man. He's a very exciting man to be working with in many ways. But because we were the only two regulars, I mean, even the producer changed, kind of quite dependent on the personalities to get, I'm not expressing myself very well, but it was kind of important that we got on well. And I don't think it was till Horror of Fang Rock where I had the guts to say in front of the camera and the crew, this isn't what we rehearsed. Because very often he'd have an idea and push it forward without any kind of rehearsal or development, and I wasn't experienced enough to deal with that. But after that we got on very, very well indeed. It's once he realised that I cared about the programme too, and I wasn't trying to take it away from him, I think. I could be maligning him. Sorry?
I think his main problem was that Leela was too violent for the series.
Yeah, maybe.
So I don't think he liked the idea of a companion going around stabbing people.
We did call those thorns Janice thorns originally, but he said that sounds like an out-of-work actress. So can we change it to Janice thorn? Which we did. Yes, I agree. But I've also heard him say, I don't think the programme's violent enough. So he was quite paradoxical to work with.
Have you seen much since?
Not much, no. Occasionally, on the train from Hastings or at a convention. I watched him do an hour and a half on his own at a convention recently, well, within the last year. And he was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. With different stories, you know, he's extraordinary the way he can pull from his memory different anecdotes. I mean, in a way, the way I'm talking today is, I'm sure some of you have heard those stories before. And I'm sorry I can't be more inventive or recall more. But he's terrific at the way he could do that and bring the story to life.
So if you saw him on the train to Hastings, would you sit with him?
Yeah, I would. Would you?
Yes. Possibly not,
Any more questions, please? Yes, at the back.
Did you press get on your back about the fever?
Sorry?
Did the press get on your back about the, violent nature of fever?
No, they didn't get on my back about the violent nature of Lilo. It was in the early 80s. I had a lot of trouble with the press when I got pregnant and I didn't want to say who the father was. And they automatically assumed he was married. He wasn't, nor was he with anybody else. But for reasons I won't go into, I didn't want it known in the press who the father was. And they were really appalling then, especially the Mirror. If any of you buy the Mirror, don't. Stop it. And the Sun as well. I got the police out one point. They were, on the doorstep, just pushing the button and frightening the kids. Through that whole 80s, 80 to 85. And the only way to stop them is just to refuse to communicate, really. Just to absolutely draw a blank. Not even say no comment, Because as soon as you're drawn in, I did prison visiting for a while as well. And they seemed to infer that I was having an affair with a murderer. Well, has anybody visited prison here? Where and when do you get down to it? But it's never quite suable, It's always just this side of being completely libelous, without me, being dragged through, because when you're suing, your own reputation is dragged through the courts, and there were certain things that I wouldn't want published, which would have come to the fore. So I don't like the paparazzi much at all, I'm afraid. Very invasive.
What's your memories of working on Dimensions in Time?
Dimensions in Time. Which oh, the right. Thank you. Mine is a really hunky German cameraman who had this weird camera that was on a. Have any of you seen it? A kind of balustrade. Have you seen these three-dimensional cameras? They work. They're sort of handheld like this, but they're out on an arm, so that if the cameraman goes like that, the camera automatically stabilizes. So it doesn't matter how fast you're running, and he did the whole thing backwards, round and round and round us. And then there was another one, another person, another German, trying to stop him tripping over with these huge, great big cables that he was wrapping himself up in. And also, poor Sylvester, who had arrived after a first night, slightly hungover, I think. Colin had done his bit, and John Pertwee had done his, and they'd been given a lot of, Doctor Who speak, which is impossible to learn, actually, especially in a few hours. All the technical jargon, and they're going, oh, Sylvester will do that, Sylvester will do that. So not only did he arrive, hungover, but he was given 3 extra pages of dialogue. I also find him immensely difficult to work with without laughing. So they're my memories. And also looking a bit like Hiawatha's girlfriend. What about that costume? You should have seen it before I got the scissors to it. They're my memories.
Yeah, another question.
Sorry, can I just say, did you understand it when you watched it?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone else did.
Yeah. Could you explain it to us?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yes, sorry.
With what you were saying before about paparazzi, did you watch the Diana interview?
I did.
Did you sympathise with her having...
I started watching the Diana interview wanting to loathe her, wanting to think she was a stupid bimbo blonde that has just attracted all this. I actually ended up feeling very sorry for her. I do think, to a certain extent, she's brought it on herself. She does that whole victim pose. It is, isn't it? And when she quite rightly said, let's use this power and let me be an ambassador for England, she then didn't have the clear ideas of exactly what she could do with it. So it was a fantastic opportunity for her to say this and this in Bosnia, this and this with the French president to stop these stupid nuclear tests, this and, she could have been really clear. But it's quite hard, isn't it, for the royalty? And what do? They're not allowed to be political, and yet, of course, they're completely political. It's really catch-22 situation. What did you think?
I thought it was good. I thought, she'd be playing a lot of sympathy, but, I wasn't prepared to give it to her at the start, but in the end I thought, poor girl. I was going to say, go for it, really.
The same. But it is manipulative, isn't it? I mean, why does she announce that she's doing it on Charles's birthday? I mean, if that isn't a brilliant piece of upstaging, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's obviously, she's hitting the ball back. She isn't just being bombarded.
2 weeks before that, the National Awakening privacy on the press.
Yeah. Well, maybe she wanted selective.
And it was broadcast on the Queen's wedding anniversary. It was broadcast on the Queen's wedding anniversary.
Oh,
as well.
was it? Oh, I didn't know that. Which is brilliant.
Any more questions, please? Yes, right at the back. David?
Is there a big difference between seeing TV series like Doctor Who from the inside and viewers, just like the viewing public, the way they see
I do. I think there's an enormous difference, but I think there's a middle ground, which is people like yourselves who are obviously so interested and generous towards the programme that you kind of come over to our camp.
But surely, if you say who's working on Doctor Who in the 70s, surely you would like a very different experience of that series to say like I was watching TV.
Yes, I suppose it was a very different experience, but like I say, I think you touch in on what it was like a bit. I think when John Nathan Turner took over, there was a huge switch around in style of the programme, and I think maybe then the divide becomes a lot bigger because it was very much more showbiz oriented rather than adventure oriented. It's not to say it's wrong, it was just different. So I think then you have a much bigger divide because people are going, oh look, so-and-so's in it, and you're looking at personalities instead of being taken up with the telling of the story, which is what's important to most actors.
The way I saw it in the latter half of the 70s, I thought it seemed quite captured some sort of essence. Like my memories of watching Doctor Who like some sort of essence of living through the 70s.
Oh, that's good.
You share that.
Well, creating history was never on my CV, but it's really nice to think that that's what some people would look, what do you remember of the 70s, and that some people would say Doctor Who is part of that. That's brilliant. So thank you.
Yes. When we wrote to Milton Johns and different actors asked him about what they remembered about working with it, he said that the thing he remembered was the invasion of time when it was freezing cold, working in that hospital, and he said you were the only person who didn't look like you were completely frozen to death and that didn't have ghost pimples. I mean, do you remember anything about that?
I remember
the costume being cold.
Oh yeah, I do actually. The one is Invasion of the time with that little man in the wheelchair. Was that Invasion of Time?
The last one.
Sunmakers is the one where I got really, really cold. Which was we were filming in Bristol on top of a Will's cigarette factory. And Tom literally, he put the end of his scarf in my mouth, literally like that, and said, roll, like that. And I rolled in, and he put the scarf, he went like this with the scarf, so that I ended up completely covered. And then when it came to actually doing the take, he'd stand me out. It was just so freezing. I remember being asked to sign autographs as I came off the set, and absolutely not being able to hold the pen. I was that cold. So,
Did you suffer ailments? Cold or?
Well, no, didn't actual fever during Wen Chiang, which I think was probably brought about by nervous exhaustion, maybe, because it was quite hard work. It was quite a quick turnaround.
Louise, do you prefer television role or stage role, and why?
I like small theatre best. That's my absolute priority. Because space about this size with about this number of people, because you can really feel that you're contacting, and you can really sense if there's a shift in attention. Or I don't mean talking as me. I mean as a performer. But it pays the worst of any of the jobs that I'm offered, really. So I have to do one to pay for the other. But I've never done really, really good film. I've done quick turnaround film. And on the moments when it's worked, the bits of tempo where you really felt you caught the essence of what was going on, then it's magic.
Yeah, it was upsetting. It was hard, I got very upset. Yeah.
So
it was very good.
Basically, actors are just a channel between the writer and the audience. We are the means by which the writer can communicate to the audience. And if the writing's good and the audience is picking up on that, then you have the best form of communication going. And that can happen on celluloid or in theatre. And I've had terrific opportunities in theatre. I can't really compare them because I've not had terrific opportunities in film yet. Yeah.
If you go
get offered a job such as taking over the ropes in Coronation Street, the silliest thing, marrying Ken Barlow, for instance, even though it pays reasonably well, would you do that? Or would you rather, because you seem to do a lot of different roles in theatre and then a bit of TV.
Yeah,
Would
it's
you
been a
not
very
want-
deliberate choice to mix the media so that I would never get completely tight in one. I wouldn't do 2 years in a soap, no. I might do 6 weeks, happily, but I wouldn't want to sign myself away for 2 years. At the moment, you know, circumstances changed and the bank manager said, get yourself a permanent job. Then, yeah, I would, but at the moment I don't need to.
Any more questions, please?
Which wants to ask how much of acting is sort of instinctive and how much can be taught?
I'll tell you a story to illustrate that. I went out to dinner. I haven't told this ever. This is a new one. I went out to dinner 3 or 4 nights ago, and it was an old friend of my husband's, and there were 5 men there, and their respective partners, right? 4 of them are on their second marriages. There's only one couple that had, you know, gone through all the years that these 5 men have worked and lived and played together. Now, the man I've been taken to meet has since emigrated to America, and he was with his new lady, and so the purpose of the evening was really to meet her, because nobody had met her. So we had a very pleasant evening at the Chelsea Arts Club. Very nice, very cosy, very nice food, very nice company, lots of wine, chit chat, and we started to talk about Doctor Who. And so this girl, I understand you were in Doctor Who. Yes. Said, a lot of gay people like Doctor Who, you know. Really? Of course, yes. Yeah, it has a very strong transvestite following. I said, does it? And she just held my eye. I thought, my God, I'm talking to a man. And she saw me take it in that this I was talking to a man. And she said, you've twigged me, haven't you? Very quietly, like. I said to my husband, before she said that, I said to my husband, the first available opportunity, Louise is a man. I just got back to my apple crumble. He stayed very still for about 10 minutes and then said, I wish you wouldn't tell me things like that. Anyway, Lisa then says to me, why haven't you given me away? Why haven't you blown my cover? I said, look, this is your truth, and that's absolutely fine. She said, I'm 6'4" and I'm black. I said, no, you're not, you're lying. So she said, okay, I'm 5'8" and I'm a man. She said, you're an actor, that's why you sussed me. Because, there was just something in the body language. And from there we got to talking about what is truth and what is acting. And at what stage are you ever really yourself? And what is your truth? And is it all right to present what you consider your truth to be? And how much is lying and how much is for the sake of the people that are around you? And it's a really interesting question, because acting isn't actually about telling lies. It's actually about telling the truth. The truth of the situation and the writer and the politics and the circumstances that you're in at the moment. I did a workshop with some kids on Wednesday, and the subject came up. And the other facilitator at the workshop said, on a scale of 1 to 10, there are times in your life where you are maybe 9/10 yourself, and there are times when you are maybe 1 or 2/10 yourself. But very, very rarely are you completely yourself. And I think that there are times on stage when you are more yourself than you are when you're off it. And I think this woman, was actually being very truthful and rather wonderful and very fascinating with her persona. And what was very interesting about the evening was that the power, I thought, when I first met her, that she had some form of epilepsy, which my stepdaughter has, which it's very minor. It's not like a big fit or anything, but it's when you talk to her, sometimes she'll just do that, and it's quite disconcerting because you just see her go away for 2 seconds and come back again. And I thought that's what this man had, because I would ask a question and she'd go away and come back. But of course what she was doing was really considering the answer, because she had to put herself into the situation of being a woman before she answered. In fact, about 15 minutes before, she'd been talking about golf and about how she loses her temper on the golf field. Golf field? Course. On the golf course. And I think it's so refreshing to hear a woman talk this way, because women don't get competitive like that. They don't lose their temper like that. I said, maybe it's because you're American, that you're more upfront. And I saw her just go away and come back in. Obviously she thought, oh God, I've nearly blown my cover at that point. But it's a very long-winded way of saying to seek truth is not easy, but it's not just whether you're on stage or off stage. I just think it's a life quest. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, that's my story.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah?
Is there any particular film director that you like to do?
Ooh. That's really... I met, what's his name, Bertolini, for a film quite recently. So I think that would have been quite fascinating if that had come on. Bertolini, Italian guy. Yeah, you're right. Bertolucci. And he talked about the dignity that English actors have, as opposed to American actors. He said he has American actors come in and talk to him, and you think that if you don't give them the job, they're going to commit suicide on the way out. He said English actors have a great dignity, and he thought that was to do with theatre tradition, that because our roots and our knowledge and our talent is very solid, and our training is very solid, which American actors don't have, because of the geography of America. You're either a theatre actor in New York or a movie actor or a television actor in LA. You can't really mix the two the way you can in Britain, which is obviously much smaller island. Geographically it's much easier. It's got to be said. So I quite like to work with him. Was there another question? Yeah.
Back in the mid-70s, there was a range of Doctor Who dolls produced by Dennis Fisher.
My mother put the doll on top of the tree instead of the flower. I did a 4.5-hour photographic session for that doll, and all I did was black up a Barbie doll. I mean, it doesn't look a bit like. Have you seen it?
I've seen it, yeah.
It doesn't look a bit like it. And where did those, where did that hourglass figure come from? Yes.
What was it like working with Paddy Russell, the director of Horror and Manuel?
It was an experience. She was, I think, I'm right in saying, the first female television director that the BBC ever employed. And a lot of women of that era that came to the fore in the late 60s, early 70s had to emulate a man's way of working in order to get and be really efficient at it. Not just emulate it, but kind of top it in its efficiency in order to get employed. So in many respects, she was quite difficult to work with. If we finished a run at 5 to 5, and we were due to finish at 5 o'clock, she would go back to the beginning and use up that 5 minutes. Well, I've never worked with a director like that before or since. You'd go, oh great, 5 minutes early, see you down the pub. You know what I mean? She was so clued in, tuned in to being super efficient. There was what I would call a lack of free flow about her direction. However, we came in under budget and on time, which is a lot to be said for a Doctor Who show. So swings and roundabouts. And with Tom, calling her Sir the entire time, didn't make for the best working atmosphere in the world.
A couple more questions.
Louise, would you prefer to have worked with a story with the Daleks or the Cybermen, I say?
I was dying to meet the Daleks, and I never did. I mean, when I first got the job, I thought, oh, goody. Those upside down pepper pots, here I am. But I never did. But the writers hate the Daleks because they talk on a monotone and they can't go up and downstairs and they've got a very limited vocabulary. You can now. Oh, can they? So I never got to work with the Daleks or the Cybermen. Or the Cybermen. I think Cybermen I'd have chosen actually too artistically. But yeah, yeah, absolutely.
One more question.
During your time on Doctor Who, did you ever, want to do a story at all, make a story, submit a story yourself?
No, I didn't. I had some ideas, but I never put pen to paper. I've only just recently started writing myself. So, no, I didn't exploit that particular side of my talent.
Talk about future plans.
I want to direct. I've recently directed a youth group, and I've directed twice before. And I'm very interested in Shakespeare, and I'm very interested in teenagers, and the idea of connecting the two is an area that I'm exploring at the moment. Maybe even on camera with Disney. It's in really, I'm touching wood here, it's in really elementary stages, but I'd be so excited if that came on. So that's my next plan.
Great. Louise, thank you very much. Can I ask you to put your hands together? We'll take a 10-15 minute break. We'll be back for autographs and draw the raffle. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.